Right. Okay, so we're back for part 2 of the Madness 3D painting competition feedback video with my ever-present man to my side, or below, Andrew. Let's get cracking. We've got now big figures category that we want to address. All right, sweet. Yeah, this one was also a very cool category and a big category as well, which was exciting to see. All right, so we're going to start off with B1, which we already got up on the screen. And I'm going to kick it off to you to get us started.
So, first things first, there are two modalities here. You've got the blue side and the red side. And as you look at the figure, you immediately see that. So, for story, I rated gave this quite a nice rating because I can clearly see defined elements of the figure. I can see the figure is quite powerful, and the base that's presented on the figure has that splash at the bottom. So it flows nicely up with the miniature and it gives the miniature some gravity. I like that. And then for the color, I would say there's some great work between warm and colder colors. So if you actually look at the miniature and you spin it in a 360, you can follow the color shift all the way around the picture, and I love that. Some nice attention to detail on the edge highlights, close to the source, especially on the sword. I think that's nice. The only critique on those edge highlights is I think they can be a little bit neater, but overall great. And you can see as the blade narrows onto that flame, it gets brighter, and it takes off into the wings. Really nice. Really nice fall off. You can't really see it at this angle, but specifically the right shoulder where the blue part is.
Yeah.
I found that on the back of the wings it was a little bit excessive pulling of washes. That was not represented on another part of the model. So I would say that's also just a little critique. If you're going to shade with your washes, keep it consistent. Make sure you load the brush with the same amount, just to keep it flowing. And then some nice detail on the face. You can see the little eye there. I can see the face in that little dark spot, so I've got the attention there, which is good. The face is not too dark. And also the lighting effects on the gems. You can see how the light refracts to the bottom of the gem and then the little clip on the top. So really nice. Overall, I thought this was a really nice entry.
Yeah, very much so. I agree with you completely. There are a couple of things that I would nitpick because everything you've said is exactly what I had in mind. The only additional things I want to sort of bring to focus is potentially that in my opinion on this photograph especially, it almost seems like on that one side the light is oversaturated. It's a bit bright and flared up a bit, so it hampers the photograph. So if that was a little bit more subdued in the photo edit, because at the end of the day, let's be honest, the photo is what you're submitting in for your contest submission, and that's the difference and the key factor with an online painting contest. So I would have edited that slightly and paid attention to that, or even tried in the photo to try and create that bit of coverage so that I would get the contrast that I'm aiming for. Right now it almost seems a little bit sort of exaggerated. But otherwise, love the work throughout. I would also like to say that, because you've got so much light source happening throughout, you want to try and pull attention to certain focal points. And in this case, I think the two focal points are the face and the sword. And the nice thing as well is I also wanted to pay attention to, which I made a note here, was how we had mentioned earlier in the previous video about OSL and creating a light source, wanting to have a source and then a glow or an effect. And here you can see that. You can see that the sword is the brightest point, which draws the eye and says, here's my source of light. And then the rest becomes the glow. So that's a nice execution. So yeah, pretty much the same thoughts that you had as well.
I mean, you can almost see where the flames are coming out. It's like a white.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, really nice entry. Cool. Right, so we're jumping from B1 over to B3 because I understand B2 was taken out of the running for the for the bus category. That's right.
For sure.
All right. Unfortunately, we're going to have one or two photos in this category that we had with the issue with the previous one that the orientation is a little bit off whack. So you can have fun with us and watch the judging at the same time. Wait, I've got to go the same way. All right. So this is B3. And let me get started off with this one. What I did love is the fact that the person put the photo and the figure in the context of where the environment is. And I love that sort of thing. I love when people think out the box and also try to bring in that real world element. For maybe one photo. But at the same time, I would always remind folks, if you're going to be submitting 3 photos and you are doing something like that for a backdrop, like I mentioned in the previous one, maybe submit one without a backdrop so that the judges have a chance to really focus on your model and the work that you put into it. Here, I think great use of colors, nice sticking to dark green and brown tones, and then bring attention to the sort of tentacle features at the top, and then the lovely use of little pink red colors for the flowers. But here, the only sort of critique I can give is to pay more attention to technique. So bringing attention to certain highlights. And if you are going to bring in spotlights, spot colors like those little red flowers, make sure that don't sort of overtake from the rest of the figure, because they're the first thing you see. And that's what we don't want essentially. So yeah, but otherwise a nice submission. And like I say, I really give a thumbs up for the backdrop, which is a nice little touch.
Oh, I agree. I think the smart photo used on the grass simulating the environment, right? I think that's nicely done. However, the issue with framing a miniature in a real life environment is now the grass is maybe not to scale. So you could read this as it's literally a miniature creature, or it's a big creature. And judging by the flowers in the beard, I would say it's a big creature, right? Which was also a nice thing to notice is the flower in the background is blurred. It's the same color as these little pips on the base.
That's what I said. It was a lovely backdrop. It actually almost fit the scene perfectly.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think the use of color here is nice. It's not too much. Nice fun colors. The inclusion of the colors on the beard and on the face.
Yep.
Pulls nicely together, saying that the sticking is in this environment. I do think, however, if you're going to have a lot of wood and a lot of grains and a lot of things running, you can lose that feeling if everything's very dark. You can lose that feeling very quickly. So on some elements, I feel like that got lost a little bit. And then I just want to commend the blending on the green. You can see there's a nice blend onto the knees and then darker a little bit again, closer to the feet. Overall, I enjoyed the entry. Nice use of blending. Would like to see a little bit more picking out some of the elements, like I said. Nice time with the beard and the face as well.
Perfect. Lovely. All right, let's move on to the next one, which is going to be B4. And once again, another use of a natural backdrop. I think this one not as successful as the previous one.
You can see that this is like a man-made garden.
But I think this was for the purposes of trying to get a decent photograph. So completely understand. And I think what actually benefits this is it actually paid attention to some of the little nuances on this one that I really actually want to commend. I can see it's got its limitations, but there are some nice little touches. So to kick it off with this one, what I really enjoyed was noticing certain little technical elements that I want to pay homage to. So for example, if you take a look at the barrel and that spin of the metal rims around the wood, I love how the person's paid attention to the black lining and making them stand out, so that even when you see it from this small of an image, because you can see it's not scaled ideally for us to be able to give it a good judge. I would love to see it a little bit more cropped up, but I can see those 3 metal rims of the barrel perfectly defined, which is nice. And the same thing happens throughout the miniature. There are a couple of moments where you can almost see a little bit of where they didn't pay attention to it as much as they did on the barrel, and that's why the barrel stands out so much, because it's got so much clear definition. Then the nice thing I wanted to pay attention to was the lovely little bit of attention to the face. So the face, once you do zoom in and look at the photo, the face becomes very clear and very defined. It's got some lovely bright highlights with a lovely use of a bit of a yellow orange, which really pops it up and really gives it a nice bit of flash. So I really wanted to pay homage to that and say to that person, those are the kind of key little techniques that you want to continue moving forward. and pay more attention to them because they benefit, especially in photographs and especially for an online contest like this. So I gave it a really, really good score with regards to technique and paying attention to that sort of thing.
Yeah. I think for me, I struggled to find a little bit of story element.
Yeah,
Piece,
that's it.
all.
That's one thing I've got to notice is that there was a lack of story. There's nothing more other than that barrel. There, you know.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. The use of color is great. I think the complementary colors of the reds and the greens work really well with the theme of an animal.
Yeah, yeah.
In a sense, and I think including the red in the warm leather,
Mm-hmm.
like even the brown has a reflection of red in it.
Yeah.
Which is nice, and you can even see on the chest there's nice lines running down showing you how the patterns on the leather works, and the leather running across has some purple in it,
Mm-hmm.
a darker color in it, so
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
a nice separation of the two types of leather, which I found nice. And a nice thing, this is pleasing to the eye because you see there are yellow details on the clothes
Mm-hmm.
and yellow details on the plates.
Yeah, there's homogeneous to the palette. Even though certain colors seem a bit oversaturated and overvalued, there is a nice bit of definition and separation, but also then homogeny with the colors.
Exactly. I also thought that the shading on the instrument was great. Not too much wash, not too little wash,
Yeah,
just enough to make it interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Just enough to vary it.
Yeah, it almost seems like there's a little bit of a gleam at the bottom rim of that,
Yes,
which is
the
nice.
edge. I don't know if the person edge highlighted or if the wash tension was put towards the hand.
Yeah,
Because that tends to happen with washes.
that's right.
To big objects. So I don't know if that was the case or if it was an intentional edge highlight. Nevertheless, the effect was achieved, and I think it was well used there. And don't be afraid to add some textual elements
Yeah, yeah.
to some of the leather parts, some of like the brace, maybe a little bit of texture on the pants there.
Mhm.
Some nice texture on the face, showing that there's like musketing going on in the front.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
thought that was nice. But overall, I think the homogeneous scheme, including some spot colors throughout, like on the face, on the shoulders, on the hips, on the feet, with the yellow. It's nice to look at it.
Yeah, yeah.
The elements can be picked out nicely, and like I said, a little bit of story to the base can be designed.
Yeah, yeah. So that's why I think it lands with its final scores because of the fact that it had such a good technical score, but unfortunately on the story side, because there was nothing more to it. It was simply just the barrel. Even if you had done something to that bottom base, even some gravel would have elevated the score much higher, so the person would have then had a good chance of actually placing. So yeah, technically top notch. Holistically, a few little faults that need to be addressed. Cool. Right, let's move on to B5. So let me just bring my cursor across here. All right, unfortunately, this is one of our slightly orientated photos. All right, so with B5, do you want to get us started?
Yeah, for sure. I think the strength of this piece is the story. I think the story shows the environment well. You can see that there are some browns on the side of those steps, kind of simulating a humid environment, like it's in a forest, right? And I think the use of blood was done well here. Not only is it on the weapon, but it's also on the hand.
Yeah.
So you can see this creature not only fighting with their weapon, but also fighting with their hand. So that immediately puts like a little scene in your head of what went down, and you can see it's also fresh.
Yeah.
And I think the coagulation of the blood is maybe a tad thick, but it's off to the technique. It's not easy to pull off. I think it's done well for the piece. And I also think that the use of colors was nice. There's some good greens and reds. Green and red is always it's a well-known complementary scheme, and I think it works well to separate the elements here.
For sure.
A little bit of critique on the handle of the weapon and the skin. It's very similar tones there for me. I would maybe like the weapon to be a little bit brighter than the skin, or at least a little bit darker, if you're going for the same hue, the same color. And then overall, I think the eyes get a little bit lost in the fur. But so there's really clean lines, clean painted. I mean, you can see the little belt running across the hips and everything. It's nicely painted. Elements are nicely separated. I just think maybe also the skin could do with a little bit of highlights. Just to, she's got such legs, and
Yeah, yeah.
you know, that arm with the nice shoulder, and I'm gonna say it, but you know, the peaks and everything.
Yeah, yeah.
There's some nice surfaces there that can just be elevated with a little
For
bit of
sure.
highlights.
For sure.
So yeah, for me, this piece story very good. The elements are well defined. Yeah, overall nice entry.
Yeah, yeah. Look, I agree completely with regards to the base and the narrative. Love the fact that the individual brought through the vine work and the brown tones to give it that weathering and attention to detail. The thing I made note of with the blood is one of those very, very careful sort of things you gotta play with, because it can come across very gimmicky. And at the same time, some people overdo it. Less is more always when it comes to adding these little kind of touches. And I like the fact that in this case, the person didn't go overboard, which a lot of people, when they attempt it for the first time, can tend to do. So, you know, credit to that person with regards to being a little bit restrictive with it, not going overboard, but then paying attention to actually putting drops on the base and so on and so forth, which is nice attention to detail. And then I agree with you with regards to the rest of the palette of the figure itself. I love the pale tones of the skin, but where I want to pay credit to is the fact that the musculature is defined, and we're starting to see how the abdomens are defined, the side of the breast, the thigh muscle, which is very important, and that one is nice and smoothly applied. But we want to now see a bit more of a transition up to a slightly more higher highlight, and also more attention to some of the shadows and defining them even more so. So that the figure is the prominent feature. That's the one thing that unfortunately I need to mention is that the base tends to draw more attention than the figure itself. And that's that whole concept of never forget that the core focus of the whole model is the figure itself. And if you do attention to the base, you've got to pay attention to the figure in order to match that. And then same mention with regards to the eyes. They do get lost in the face. And as we've mentioned before, faces and bases. So yeah, a little bit more attention to the face would have also then helped draw the viewer's eye towards it. But yeah, nice solid entry, and a couple of things to pay attention to moving forward. But yeah, potential. All right, let's move on to the next one. All right, and this is B6, if I stand corrected, hey?
Yes.
Keeping track of us. All right, cool. That's right. Cool. All right, who's starting us off on this one? Is it me? All right, cool. In regards to this one, what I really like is the fact that the most high valued colors that bring the most attention to the viewer's eye are the central colors that have been introduced in the figure. So that bright, vibrant purple, pink is what gets me paying attention right off the bat, which is a nice attention to detail with regards to that. The thing that bothers me a little bit is it almost becomes a case of the figure gets split into 3 color palettes, because the wings are a separate set of tones, but there's no tie-in with maybe some deep reds and purples that introduce it being part of the figure and its main character, which is the lady. And then the same thing applies with the bottom of the base. It tends to go into now a whole new pastel set of colors and loses the vibrancy, but there isn't that much tie-in that then gives the whole thing a homogeneous look. So that's the only thing I want to pay attention to, because otherwise, credit to painting wings. We all know that wings are a swear word in our community. So credit to painting wings. Credit to paying attention to that vibrancy and that pink. And I love how there's even that line of highlight that runs down the extended leg. Excellent attention to detail. Although remember, it wouldn't be as shiny from start all the way down to finish. You want to see a transition. That's it. But otherwise, lovely use of colors here and there. Just needs more attention on a sort of homogeny with the colors working together, and introduce some of the colors that you've worked on throughout the piece. But yeah, lovely thing. Then the last thing I want to pay attention to is, unfortunately, the face gets lost, because it's either a case of, and this is just my experience, from the photo being over white balanced on the face. So the face gets lost with some of the details. So pay attention to your photo editing with that, so that the face doesn't get lost with it being flared up. But yeah, nice solid piece. Lovely use of color.
Yeah, I also thought it was quite a nice piece. The cold base was a little bit confusing to me with the hot blue fire coming out. But overall, I think the smoke effect at the bottom was simulated relatively well compared to the flame poking out at the top.
Yeah.
What I did like from a color nice separation of character with the use of color from the bottom of the base to
Mhm.
the temperature.
Mhm.
You can clearly see that definition, but like I said, there is a little bit of a misunderstanding in my mind of
Mhm.
why is this environment so cold with this warm figure in it.
Yeah, yeah.
And at the same time, that can be very powerful, but another, you know, it doesn't really tie in with the environment for me
Mhm.
that well.
Mhm.
There's nice bright colors that shows motion. You know, as you go
Mhm.
up, it gets brighter.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's all. The wings at the top is a little bit too bright, and I didn't really understand the brown tones in the wings. I
Mhm.
thought that was very
Yeah.
comparison.
You see why I say the browns don't seem to be introduced anywhere else, so they seem to be
Yes.
disjointed on their own as opposed to part of the whole piece.
Exactly. There's such lovely colors on the wall.
Yeah, yeah.
Even the skin at the top has some
Yeah, yeah.
I'm specifically referring to, you know, the leggings and the things on the arms,
Mhm.
which is separated from the normal piece of clothing. There's a slight hue difference.
That's right.
And you
Mhm.
can pick it up. And what I like what this person did was they actually simulated two different pieces of cloth.
Mhm.
The top seems way more loose and soft, and while the pieces on the legs and the arms
Seems to be almost.
tight.
I think they were trying to also go for that reflective kind of shiny look to it. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
With the high jump, that's a brave move. The high jump contrast with
Mm.
white. It's not a gradual increase.
Well, much less with red as well, because we always got that fear of going to pink.
Exactly. So I just want to give a compliment to that.
Yeah, yeah.
That's brave painting,
Mhm.
because the legs are actually my favorite part.
Yeah, yeah. I wonder if you would agree with me. If there was one thing I would say to the person that you could do as a 10, 15-minute exercise and would boost a big difference, is to introduce some washes of purple and reds into the wings, especially in the membranous sort of areas of the wings, so that you get this now adherence to the rest of the figure, the main figure. And then that yellow swirl that hits at the bottom of her leg, and then there's a bit of cloudness, and then there's another little bit of that yellow. If you kept the vibrancy of that yellow pushing through there, and then continue it down at the bottom where there seems to be an unpainted piece at the bottom, a little pink piece that sticks out. You could almost have the viewer believe that flame effect is almost traveling through the smoke down there, and you could also then bring in some of that vibrancy that's lacking, and that would tie the yellow in.
Really nice.
So that's the only thing that I would suggest, that it's there, just a few little touches, and that could actually be a phenomenal piece.
I definitely award points for bravery and points for actually trying different textures. It's not
Agreed.
easy to achieve, and I think
For sure.
it's done really nicely.
Excellent. Nice piece.
I enjoyed the entry.
For sure. All right, let's move on to the next one, and that's going to be B7. All right. And you want to get us started off on this one?
Interesting entry.
Mm-hmm.
This entry, the skin is very unique.
Yeah.
What I liked about the skin is that the title of the story and the environment, right? You can see, when I look at this, I want to go put on my jacket. I can feel like this is a cold environment.
Mm-hmm.
Use of motion.
Yeah, yeah.
The white snowfall is nicely indicated by the stone.
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes, you think, okay, it's snowfall, where's this thing going? You can see on the stone that the snowfall is actually hitting the top and at the bottom, not so much.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a nice way to just really give you the indication of where this guy is.
Mm-hmm.
And the texture is also nice. It's almost powdery. I can almost feel it. Like if I would rub my finger across it, I would feel something.
Yeah, yeah.
That's at least how I perceive it. Whether that's the case or not doesn't matter. That's how I perceive it. And I think that's what the person wanted to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
For the color, I love the use of the two predominant colors throughout the piece, which is red and blue, right?
Yeah.
And it's quite interesting to include red in a cold piece, but the red that you included is almost a colder red. If you look at the fingers of the figure as well, it's almost, I'm not sure if it was intended to be blood, but for me that simulated the extremities getting colder.
Mm-hmm.
So it was nicely simulated there for me, and if you look at the skin, it's really interesting, and there's a lot going on, which is a strength.
Yeah,
I also feel like there's a balance. I feel like in this piece it was almost done too excessively, where some highlights are lost.
Mm-hmm.
Some attention to flow of light was lost a little bit for me, because my eyes are so busy looking at all of the nuance in the skin and all of the things going on. I wasn't sure if this was a reflection of what's under the skin, or if he's maybe bruised a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, I also like the technique point, especially on the guards on the hands.
Yeah, yeah.
There's some really texture work.
Yeah.
There's some lines there, there's some dots there, there's some scratches, there's some, some dents there that I could pick up. So I thought that was really, really nice. I'm a little bit confused about it's just above that with all the yellow in it.
Yeah.
That's almost the only place on the model where there's like that really warm color. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be a light source or if it's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
But overall, I think what's really nicely simulated here is the intricacies of the skin, the texture work on the metal plates, and also the environment. Painting the whole media to fit that environment. Aside from the piece on the arm, I would say it's a really nice entry.
Yeah. Look, this one had me. I really actually, was enjoying this one. Because at first the here's how it starts. So first I selected from each of the submissions. Remember that each contestant got to submit 3 photos. And I would pretty much just select the golden angle photo for us to use in the feedback video so that we wouldn't have 6,000 photos to go through. And this is the only model where I battled to choose my golden angle. And the best one that I wanted to use to reflect this model, because it had so much interest for me. So I battled because it was a choice between this one and the opposite angle where you see all the attention paid to that shoulder pad. Yeah, exactly. So I was bummed about that because I wanted that side, but I also wanted this side because this side showed more reflection of the skin that was so damn interesting, and the attention with regards to the arm and why there's that one issue that we want to address. If I had shown the photo on the other side, we would be talking about that little yellow thing most people wouldn't know because there was nothing tying it in any way, shape, or form on the other side. So, I stuck with this photo at the end, and that was because I really wanted to pay attention to that skin. I'm just intrigued to know how he did it, or how they did it. I'd love to know. Yeah, exactly. I love that mottled effect. I love the fact that it's bringing in these lovely tones that for me almost led me to believe of that heavy patinaed metal, copper, brass kind of stuff. If you've ever seen old brass statues that have been buried underground for a while, and you pull them out and they're weathered and dirtied and just full of this turquoise verdigris and bronzing, and it's just so interesting to look at. So that's what first came to mind when I looked at that. It had that metal patining, and then that had me going, okay, but now, what is the artist going for? Is he going for this interesting skin tone, or is he trying to make this figure seem like he's got that metallic verdigris running through the skin? Is it a metal golem kind of thing? I don't know. So, that's the issue is that excellent use of story narrative through color, but I need to then know if that's the case, then there needs to be more attention to that throughout the piece so that I, as the viewer, read that correctly. You know what I mean?
So what you're saying is you had a hard time figuring out what was the mission.
That's it. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So that's the thing. But really, really, really love the technique and love the look of it. Now I want to say to the person, do me a favor, look more into that. Dive more into that technique and see if you can't replicate that on metal armor of certain figures, and then work on your flesh tones, and then baby, you got something to play with. So yeah. I want to sort of recommend reading up on Blanchitzo's style as well. That Blanchitzo style that I mentioned earlier, that really rough, free expressive painting, and it tends to also lean well to grim dark. And you and I mentioned earlier in grim dark, this one leans more to grim dark for me than unfortunately I want to say about the other 3 from the grim dark category, because this one seems grim dark. Everything seems weathered and worn and rusty, and there's that texture to it, and that's what I enjoyed about it. So, a little attention more to what it is that you're trying to portray with the color palette. Look out for things like that yellow is just, it constantly pulls the eye because we keep staring at it and going, what is it? What are you trying to reflect there? Is it a magical effect, or is it just a piece of thread material that's been, woven there and that's looking yellow and white and red? And so I'm not too sure. So, that's why I wanted to pay attention to that. But otherwise, yeah, anything that gets you looking at it and really asking questions, in my books, is a good entry. So yeah, something that I want to sort of say to the person, keep working with this and dive into this, because this, I think, could be your style. It's something really unique and interesting. Cool. For sure. All right, let's move on. We're going to B8, right?
Yes.
Okay, now B8 had me going, yeah, awesome to see. Very cool. Yeah. I'd seen this entry, or not the entry, I'd seen the model in one of the pre-releases that we did for the Wildstorm Discord. Remember, it was one of the pre-orders. And if I recall correctly, it was the bust version of this model that we saw. And I loved the idea of this rock character, but I, in my head, saw the idea of something that had rocks then floating around it. Almost what's it, the Star Wars Jedi rule now. If you want to be a Jedi, you need to make rocks float.
Exactly.
So in this case, love the fact that the person brought that dynamic, brought the rocks in, and this whole sort of epic narrative to the piece. So that for me was tick 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 tick, and that got my attention. Then the next thing that grabs my attention is just this homogeneous, beautiful color palette. I love the use of the light blues and the oranges that then create this lovely combination color, which we all know really, really works beautifully well. And then I love the attention to the green pants. And then even more so, remember we keep talking about focal points and bringing in the viewer's eye as they now look at your piece and pay more attention to it. You want their eye to be shifting across the things that you've brought attention to. So I love how the middle tunic is in a pale whitish color, because it now, out of everything, it doesn't get lost. It actually brings more attention to the central focus. The only downside is it does a little bit detract from the face. My eye keeps wanting to wander down to the middle as opposed to stay at the face first and really pay attention to that. So I think that's in regards to bringing more of that OSL effect, so that there's a little bit of reflection on the rock on the side by his face, so that you get more of the viewer wanting to stare at the top, because you've got so much. Yeah, you've got so much happening with the rocks. Don't forget to make sure the viewer is looking at who this is that is creating this scene, that's your main forte. But yeah, tick tick with regards to bringing in the rock texture. I love the hammer, that stone granite kind of work on the hammer, man. Tick tick for little under highlights on the scratches, paying attention to that. The gold non-metallic, lovely use of gold non-metallic, especially on those on the armor plates on the shins. Just be wary of your traveling of light, because the light luminosity isn't working too well for me on that. But that's me being nitpicky, because this was a 2 thumbs up. Lovely piece to see.
Yeah, for sure. I think that the use of a backdrop is quite clever to frame not only the movie but also the time.
Yeah.
It really gives you a sense of where this character is.
Yeah.
And the use of oranges and the rocks in the background really ties it together. I think the use of color, it's almost like a desaturated third rate,
Yeah.
which is actually quite clever, because the sunset things lead to some saturation, depending on obviously the type of sunset that you have. But you can really see in the background that it's a really yellow sunset.
Yeah.
It's not striking. It's like just a normal day. So the fact that the piece has lost a little bit of saturation was actually not a bad. It also ties the figure in with the rocks, but not too much, so you can still see the figure, what the figure is.
Exactly.
General thing while looking at the figure, my eyes keep going to the knees. The knees are very striking. And I feel like every time I look at the face, I'm going back to them.
Yeah. Do you see what I mean by there's so much nice attention to the bottom parts that the viewer keeps going away from the face and looking down, whereas opposed to, I like to sort of always be drawn to the face and then look at a detailed face. And that for me is really a figure that's grabbing my attention to, the focal point. Whereas in this one, I agree with you. You tend to sort of from that belt buckle downwards is where you pay most of your attention to, instead of staying focused at the top. So maybe a little attention to bringing something that appeals to the viewer up at the top. But yeah, it's yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'd rather use the word consistent because that's also bad. I tend to lose where are we going? Where's the light coming from? What's happening? I've got this lovely backdrop with all of the light focused in the center point, right? We can see.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, 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 yeah. And yeah, just a lovely piece of creating that sort of punch that's breaking through from the ground up. Just yeah, lovely piece, man. And like I said, this is us just being nitpicky because as judges, that's the job that we're given to do, and it's not an enjoyable task. But yeah, for me, it's always a pleasure to critique a piece that is well painted, and this is a beautifully well painted piece. Yeah, yeah, exactly. But yeah, lovely piece of work, man. All right, cool. So that was B8, if I stand corrected. Yeah. All right. So this is now B9. Yeah, go for it. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Mm. For sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. For sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Look, I what I really like about this one is that there's almost a brown orange tone that runs throughout the piece, and it ties the flesh with the base, which is a nice good start. Love attention to the base and everything that you mentioned, with a little attention to detail with regards to darkening the joints of the tufts and everything like that. But unfortunately for me, that the base detracts a lot from the model because there's all this activity, and also because it's vibrancy. It's the brightest orange part, and it's the one of the biggest parts of the whole piece altogether. So you really keep getting drawn by this bright orange at the bottom. So be wary if you do that, that you need to then draw us up to the top and pay attention to the face. Um, Extra critiques, what I would suggest is paying more attention to the texture on the beard that's flowing from there. Maybe bring in some nice highlights, and that's just a good simple attention to dry brushing as a core technique. Just bring in a bit of dry brushing and bring attention to that beard, bring attention to the nose, and that way the viewer is naturally drawn to all that effort you've put into putting the pupils into the spot that you have. And then to still put a white dot within the pupil as well, kudos to you. But then, of course, don't put in all that effort and then we lose it as the viewer because we're not being drawn to it by you and saying, here, pay attention to this face. Look at the nose that I've brought now. Focus. Absolutely. And then little other things like, for example, be wary of cleanup on the surface. If you take a look at the fist that is clenched on the opposing hand that is not holding the hammer, you can almost see the grains on the finger work. So be mindful of that to clean that up and give it a good clean finish, because for me it almost comes across as a wood texture. So now I get immediately jarred and going, is the model a wooden based creature, or is he actually a human looking creature, which to me is what he is. So little things like that can throw off a viewer, and it's little things like that of prep and sand and clean, and be mindful of little things like that. And then I agree with you, the part with the OSL for me is a lost little touch. At first it comes across as an inlay, so it looks like it's a decorative part of the armor, but my gut says I want it to be an OSL. I want it to be glowing. I almost want it to be like runes that are glowing in the arm, and it would have been lovely to bring in a little white line in the center so that you give it a little bit of that luminosity and put a little bit of glaze on the edges so that they look like they're glowing a little bit. And then the last point I want to bring is just a little bit of attention to fine details, especially on that metal plate armor. It's very flat in tone, so by bringing in either some washes and tones, which is where the blue for me is what was missing. The blue is on that little sash in the middle, but it then isn't reflected anywhere else. And the blue is a missed opportunity to bring into those metal plates and give those metal plates on the body definition and more contrast and more depth, so that you can play around with a few highlights as well at the end of the day. But yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's it. So yeah, so just some core techniques that need to be sort of focused on, and this is off to a really good start. Like I say, lots of potential that we could see we would bring to it, and that for me is a good start for a painter. That people can still say to you that this can still be taken further, which is a good start. But yeah, nice solid entry. Cool. Right, so let's move on to now B10, right? Now this one I ended up taking two photos. I'm sorry. I'm going to admit now, this one is one of my favorites, man. Like I said, I did not look at any of the entries. I did not know what people were painting. I purposely tried to really stay out of it. And then last night, here I am, judging and judging, and it's late at night. You saw the time I was judging. And you should have seen me when this one popped up on the screen. I was like, wow, what the hell? Dude, where the... Yeah, I'm not going to swear on this one. Yeah, beautiful, beautiful piece. And I'm going to say that now, probably my favorite of the competition. One of my favorites of the competition. Yeah, yeah. Mm. Yeah. Yeah, look, we'll be here for a while, because this one for me, there's so much work done. There's so much to pay attention to, and so much to pay credit to the artist. Um, Absolutely, absolutely. And the funny thing about something like this is you get very nitpicky because you're trying to find issues with it. And for me, when I see something that I love, I try not to over criticize it because I want to pay, homage to the artist and say, you know what, you grabbed my attention and I loved what you did, and I'm not going to be too nitpicky. But unfortunately, that's not the job we have today. Um, but yeah, the thing is, this one is if I'm being nitpicky, I'm just being nitpicky because it really is just absolutely beautiful on so many levels. So let's get started. Right. For me, narrative story, I'm there. I can feel the moss on the trunk. I can see the swampy water at the bottom. I can see all this foliage. I can see the luminous little mushrooms that you've got glowing off in the different parts of the model. Um, you know, it's just such a beautiful scene and narrative. You got my attention. I'm there. Use of color. Love the use of color throughout the base. The base is so homogeneous, and I love the little, purple flowers that then pull your eye and grab your attention. The little yellow mushrooms on the far corner. I love the attention to the leaves and actually bringing in all the little, veins in the leaves. Beautiful stuff. The figure is absolutely beautiful. The only thing for me is the red seems to be a little bit off for me, and I'm trying to, but like I say, I'm just being nitpicky because the thing is absolutely beautifully done. For me, I've always had a thing about painting competitions where a person who paints a small single figure on a small base beautifully can win a golden demon, but someone who put in 900 hours and created an intricate piece, and a lot of it is custom built and scratch built, and it's sculpting, and it's work, and it's all that effort, and then you pull off a display level piece. To lose out to someone who put in a fraction of the amount of time that you put into your piece is disheartening. And here I see work. I see attention to all the mushrooms. I see all the attention to little on all the feathers around the collar, bringing out all those details. I love the little luminescence on the scythe. And that's why I say, for me, this is just such a lovely piece, but I pay credit to the artist with the amount of work because you put in the work, a lot of work into this. And, when someone puts in that amount of effort, you want to pay attention to that. So, yeah, just lovely stuff. And then just, attention to detail on everything. It's almost like the person really, would finish a piece and then say, well, what more can I bring to it? And then a little bit more and a little bit more. And it's just, lovely stuff. I love the glow effect in that cave section just under the bark as it flows with the water. Just, yeah, just lovely piece. Yeah, 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 yeah. And that's, yeah, yeah. And that's why for me, I apologize. I'm being unfair, but I had to bring in a second photo because, you pay even closer attention. I mean, look at the bark, how you've even got that little sort of cracked texture on the bark. Just lovely stuff. Nice resin work. Resin is always a risk and always a chance of screwing up everything that you've done. But in this case, the resin is nice and clear. A little touch on the bubbly side, but I can still see all the detail of all the rock and pebbles underneath the waterline, which is lovely, lovely stuff. And a nice clean bordered resin finish, so it doesn't detract from the rest of the piece. So yeah, just lovely piece, man. Really enjoyed this one. Your thoughts? Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. That's what I was about to say. Yeah. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm, yeah. Mm, yeah. This for me covers those two things that you and I have been discussing this whole time, which is the first thing, which is faces and bases. The face is the highlight; it's the focal point because it gets drawn to you by the staff. It was a clever use of the staff being so vibrant that it naturally pulls you to it, and then like you said, the face is right next to it, and you can't help but look at it. Um, but even so, all this base detail doesn't detract from that. Like you said, you look down, you look to the side, you go back to the face. You look down to the side, you notice the mushrooms, you come back, and you're constantly shifting because there's so much to see, but nothing detracts from everything else. Everything, yeah. Yeah. So once again, it's that whole what we've been discussing about tying things in and making things homogenous. So by making sure that some of the mushrooms in his pouch match the mushrooms on the ground, to make sure that luminosity in the staff and in the face isn't then lost in the base by introducing it with those mushrooms. So it's just, you know, faces and bases just ticks the box. But for me as well, the second thing I wanted to say was narrative, story. Here, what is for me important for people to take note is where the story and the narrative has driven the finish. As in, like you said, paying attention to the mushrooms, paying attention to the little spots of color with the glowing mushrooms, and making sure that the viewer is constantly entertained with little things to see the whole time, and they all add to the narrative, the whole storyline at the end of the day, which is this little character, foraging through the woods of this, mystical woods. So yeah, just lovely piece, man. Mm. Yeah, yeah, mm-hmm. Yeah, mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, we like so that you almost feel guilty trying to point up anything about this because it's such good work. But it is the nature of the job that we've been tasked to do. So, but yeah, for me, I agree with you. This is why I said to you earlier, right in the beginning, I said to you there was something about the red cloak, and I think as I stare at it more, I think it's because of the fact that there's so much luminescence and focal point to the sight and the eye, and then so much attention to the base that the middle of the model almost gets a little bit lost because we keep looking at the base and the details, and then up to the face and the mushroom backpack, and then down to the details on the base and the base and the base, and then the face and the base and base. And then you forget to actually pay attention to this lovely leather tunic in the middle, and then this lovely piece of fabric cloth, which has been highlighted and blended with contrast so nicely, but they get lost. So I think where the only thing I would nitpick is if you take a look at the red fabric on the forearm that's holding the little basket. If those highlights are pushed just a little bit more and a little bit more attention to it, starts to draw the viewer along the arm line up to the face and vice versa. And that's just being nitpicky, like I say. Uh, mhm. Wait, sorry. That one. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Look, for sure. I will dare say it. I will dare say it, but this one is world class. It's just fantastic, fantastic work. It really is. I think it would really get a lot of attention purely because of the level of work and the attention to detail. Just a really nice piece. Yeah. And then credit to the photo work as well, because it's given us, no questions to ask on what it is that we're judging. And I like the nice little touch of the backdrop, which gives it that sort of foresty backdrop as well. So further adding to the narrative. But yeah. Yeah, that's just a lovely piece, man. Absolute lovely piece. All right, let's move on. Otherwise, we'll talk about this one for the rest of the damn evening. But yeah, like I say, my favorite piece so far. All right, then we move on to, I think it is B10. Is that correct? I just want to make sure we're still on the same page. Is it B10? No, that was B10. This is B11. That's right. Sorry, just before I get lost. So we're on to B11. All right. Do you want to get us started on B11? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Huge. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. If it was intentional or if it was accidental, but yeah, that's something that we can bring to your attention is the nice use of a potential scale idea. Mm. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. 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 I see that. Yeah, yeah. I see that. Mm-hmm. 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 You'll be lost completely. Yeah, yeah. For sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I agree. A couple of things, with regards to that neon green with that deep blue. It's a very popular combination. But for me, what stands out is that the person who painted this has a natural eye to at least see that those two colors work well. And then to introduce red in a very sporadic manner so that you're introducing it into the eyes, a little bit on the guitar piece there, and then of course at the top of the guitar handle. You know, that for me says that naturally you understand how colors should work, that you shouldn't over dominate certain colors, and that one color can be used as a spot color while the other two colors work well. So for me, I say to this person, you've got certain little things that show me that you've got a little bit of technique, maybe some natural technique, which is brush control and being able to do fine lining. I know folks who've been painting for years and still battle to do nice fine lines. So, credit to you on doing fine lining, and credit to you in showing that you've got some brush control or understand brush control. So, lean into it and really sort of, work on some of your core techniques. The base coats and the colors that have been applied are nice and smooth and solid, and there's, full opacity throughout. But now I want you to sort of work on introducing definition, washes, contrast, and actually defining some of the musculature in the troll. The white hair, lovely attention to detail of defining the hairline between the skin and the hair, but then it stops and no attention is brought to all the strands of the hair. So a light gray wash within that would have even simply done, a world of difference to bring some of that definition. But yeah, a nice, good core start. I think you're off to some potential here. And if you really, sort of put in some time and effort, you can really grow as a painter. It's always good to have a natural eye for color. So that's a good way to start. Cool. Right, let's move on to B12. Come on, there we go. All right, unfortunately, B12 is quite a large file. So even if I had oriented it the other way, we would have lost a lot of what we're trying to see. So apologies to everyone. It is a little bit to the side. But this one, once again, when someone's put in a lot of work and a lot of effort, you want to pay homage to that and pay them respect. I apologize. It is sideways. But yeah, let me get started off on this one. For me, like I said, right off the bat, the amount of work, you've got to really just take your hat off to someone, because projects like this, and they're so big and daunting, A. B, so much repetition of the same colors can be daunting. C, wings, as we mentioned earlier, are a nightmare. So, this person's ticking all the box on what's the most challenging project to take for a competition. Tick, tick, tick. Here's the model you undertake. So massive credit to the person for the effort, the work involved. And I love the use of all that vibrant orange and yellows and deep, almost black reds in some cases, which is nice. The lovely use of the turquoise color as a spot color along the bottom of those strands of the feathers, which is a nice spot color, and then to tie them in with a little bit of the turquoise on the top of the head. But in having said that, be mindful to make sure that everything doesn't come across as just everything's screaming and shouting at you. There's a lot of vibrancy going that your eye is almost unable to settle in one place for too long, because there's too much, and there's nothing that's drawing your eye to really pay attention to one particular area for too long. So be mindful of creating a bit of variety. Maybe introduce more deeper, darker reds to the bottom of the base, so that you bring more attention to the vibrancy of colors at the top of the model, to the phoenix itself. So things like that. And then once again, for example, if you look at the head, very orangey tones in the highlights of the head, but then the wings next to it have these beautiful bright yellow highlights. So your attentions to the wings and not to the. So if you had used yellow highlights on the head and more orange highlights on the wings, just that simple reversal of those two highlights would have made a big difference, because the viewer then naturally gets drawn to the brighter face. But yeah, massive hats off, because I know projects like this are daunting to undertake. So yeah, lovely, lovely work. Yeah, it's very much, yeah. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Mm-hmm. 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 Exactly. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Would you agree with me that this is once again one of those pieces where if you spent another 20-30 minutes with an airbrush and you brought in some deeper, darker tones to the bottom, so that you pull away the attention from the base towards the phoenix, and then bringing in a few specular highlights on the tips of the wings and in the face and those sort of things that we've just mentioned. 20-30 minutes of work with an airbrush and a little bit of detailing with brush strokes, and you'd have a massive difference. So yeah. Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. It's made it too glossy. Yeah. Hmm. Oh yeah. Yeah. Did you notice? Yeah, yeah. Did you notice, by the way, this is another credit to the artist, because you and I have both done wings, and yeah, wings, like we say, never fun. But you take a look at the unfortunately bottom wing here, the dark red, and then the person's actually come in and brought in those little fine. That's attention to detail and feathers. A lot of people tend to go, I'm not doing that, and they just outline the feather. Here, the person's bringing in that texture, and that's the world of difference when it comes to feathers. Very much so. Yeah, 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 yeah. The work, yes, yeah, that's asking to be, sent off to the loony bin once you're done. But even just that little bit of attention makes me, the viewer, really enjoy looking at the wings there and seeing that portion, because I can see the effort and that little bit of detailing. And to me, hats off. Mhm. Yeah, yeah. I was about to say the same thing. Remember, I was saying to you, with an airbrush, you could come in and just actually create the vignette. Is That's it. Yeah. So that the head and the body become the brightest portions of the entire piece. Subdue the edges of the wings even darker, reduce the bottom of the base even darker, bring in some deep purples and tones so that you really subdue it, so that the viewer is forced with nothing else but to stare straight at the face and the body, and that's your view. And then the nice thing is that all that turquoise, detailing with all that work there becomes a focal point. But yeah, lovely piece of work, and hats off to the work, man. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, very much so. Right, cool. Next one is B13. Well, is that it? Are we done? No, we're not done. Am I missing B13? I think I'm missing B13. Have I? That's right. For some reason, I didn't pull through 14, 13, and 15. Bugger. Give me 2 seconds. Tell you what I'm going to do is let me quickly pause this. And are we unpaused? Are we recording? Yeah, we're recording. All right, so this is B13. All right. Do you want to get us started on B13? Will I settle myself after that? Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. You know what jumps to mind for me when I look at this one is Avatar. It's got that color scheme and that vibrancy. Yeah. And I wonder if you lean more into the Avatar and broaden it a bit more vibrancy with some white, pure white colors, so that you bring in a little bit of that shine and brightness, almost like glowing effects. This one would pop. So yeah, big tick with regards to color use. And I agree with you. I like that sort of almost glittery, glistening effect on the wings, which is a nice touch. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Hmm. 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 Yeah, 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 yeah. I like this one. This one I put in with the others that we keep saying are good core foundation models. You've got good starting points. You've got good base coats, good brush control. you know, a little bit of understanding of dilution, and you're playing around with, you know, bringing in different mediums and shininess and so on and so forth. So, you know, now moving on with, you know, focusing on the next set of techniques, and intermediate level work will progress your paint skills in a big way. But you've got a good core start, which is something I want to endorse. Cool. All right. So that's number 13. Let's move on to number 14. Where am I here? Cool. Right. That's number 14. No, that's number 15, isn't it? That's 14. That's number 14. Right. So number 14, Lizard Man. Let me get us going on this one. Right. So right off the bat, love the fact that you've got this, you know, giant head skull sitting on the floor, and this figure sitting with it, you know, proudly displaying its prey. I love the use of that green color because it draws the viewer's eye to pay attention to the fact that this giant head skull is on the floor. Nice bit of, you know, foliage, nice bit of work there. But of course, once again, it's that whole discussion about faces and bases. Here, the base has been paid attention to, but in my personal opinion, when I first look at it, it's the thing that draws all my attention most of the time. I keep looking at that vibrant green, you know, bearding and hair, and it keeps pulling my eye, because the rest of the figure, although I think intentionally done to keep it in a more natural tone, makes sense to me. But unfortunately, maybe it's the neon tentacles that don't make sense to me. That maybe those need to be more naturally subdued, so that the figure becomes the prominent piece that the viewers looks at you know, at first glance, and stays there. But in having said that, love a couple of things on this piece. I love that you've paid attention to the musculature and brought in some of that textured skin. So for me, the leather skin feels leathery. It feels, you know, rough to the touch. Love the attention to details with regards to, you know, trying a good attempt at some non-metallic metal work. I can see it's, you know, very beginner levels, but nice, good, strong attempt. Love the use of a purple gemstone that draws the viewer's eye to that gemstone, and it's a good spot color that works with the piece. But it would be nice to see that purple introduced somewhere else, just so it ties it in somewhere. And then, you know, the last two notes, first the face, you lose a bit of the face because of all that detailing with all that bone work. You know, it gets lost for the viewer, especially in the photograph. In person might be completely different if we were to hold a piece in person, but through the camera lens, you know, it gets a little bit lost. And then there's this very, very deep shadow in the arm that's crooked, holding the axe head. So it keeps drawing your attention away, because that very contrasted shadow is a little off-putting to the rest of the piece. It's almost like a totally different technique is introduced there by mistake, where the rest of the figure is all very nice and homogeneous and textured. That one arm section there almost looks cartoony. So it detracts from it. So it's the one little core thing I'd like to pay attention to. And then the last thing I want to pay credit to is the blood splatter effect. It's not often people can get blood splatter right. And here, this person's got the blood splatter just perfect, man. I almost want to go share the recipe. I want to know how you did that one, because that one is nicely done. It's got this beautiful speckled effect, and it's not overly done. It's top notch. So yeah, that's my thoughts on this one. Mm. Yeah. Mm. Mm. Yep. Mm. Mm. Yeah, 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 yeah. Mm. Yeah, 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 yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah, yeah. Mm. Mm. Yeah, yeah. Mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a nice little detail that you notice after you stay for a little bit longer at the piece. You get naturally drawn straight away to, of course, the giant's head, and then you notice the lizard, and you pay more attention to him. And then when you notice the axe, it's this cool little surprise, and you go, oh wow, that looks so cool. So a nice little touch, and it's yeah, very cleverly done. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, people, like I said, people tend to make it look like the person's literally left the axe sitting in the pool of blood and then whipped it out like that, and it's sitting there glistening in all this blood. Not the case. It's usually more of a spray, and there's like a streak of blood, and that's it. And this is just, yeah, lovely done, nicely done. Mhm. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Hmm. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Hmm. Very much so. Nice, nice bit of work. Yeah, yeah, and a good starting point to now grow as a painter, because there's core areas here that you can now really focus on and really build as a skill set. So yeah, nice work. Right, and then the last one in this category is a B14, right? Let me make sure. No, B15. I'm gonna get my numbers wrong, man. This is B15. B15. All right. Okay. Last one of the big bust or big figure category, I should say. And yeah, let's have you get us started on this one. For sure. Yeah, yeah. It's gruesome. Yeah, yeah. I saw that. Hmm. 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 Yeah, yeah. Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Hmm. 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 Yeah, it's almost like the glow is only affecting it's almost like when you shine fluorescent light on a surface and only certain points of it, flare up. What's it with an ultraviolet light? Only certain colors flare up. It's almost like that's what's happening to the robes, because only the trim is highlighted. Only the trim. Exactly. It doesn't go into the reds, where you would have that glowing effect hitting the reds. And you've got to also remember that green light reflecting on a red surface actually gives it a dark green color. So you'd actually have to paint your reds more dark greens to get the real glowing effect. Yeah. And here it does detract a little bit, because it almost seems like, just the trim of the cloth is what's being highlighted, and not the cloth itself. Mm. Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Uh, yeah. Do you notice that horrible sickly green that's like sitting as a wash in between all the it's yeah, it's lovely stuff, man. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it feels corrosive, you know what I mean? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's that's the one thing I was going to point out. It's almost like it's all this gruesomeness, all this, but he is the marketing spokesperson for Trident, dental toothpaste because it's perfect clean white teeth. So be mindful of that. You want to introduce maybe even sickly green and red washes into it to give it that bit of dirtiness to it and not make it so polished clean because yeah. Mm, mm, mm. Very much so. Yeah. Yeah. In this case, it's drawing the viewer's eye to the face, but not in a good way. It's because the teeth just seem jarring because they just seem too, vibrant. Um, yeah, yeah, yeah. Hmm. Very much so. Yeah. And that's nothing but compliment to the painter. When you can actually make someone feel sick because you've made that look sickly, that's compliment, man. That's story narrative. For me, everything you've mentioned, I agree with. Only two extra points I want to bring out is just be mindful, especially with dioramas, especially with backdrops and things like that. If you take a look at the backdrop of the tunnel, you can see how the light of the photo box has picked up the ridges of the cardboard, so that throws it right inside the tunnel behind him. Can you see? You can actually see the little ridges of the corrugated cardboard. Did I get lost there a little bit? I think with the rain. Yeah. Am I up to date? Are you with me so far? All right. So what I was mentioning is in the back of the tunnel, right at the back of the tunnel, that piece of cardboard that is paint, you can see it's a piece of cardboard. You can actually see the ridges of the card. So pay attention to something like that. That can be a little bit off-putting for the viewer and takes them out of the scene that you're trying to put them into. And you've got so much immersion going, but then the minute I see that, I can't stop looking at that little streak of cardboard that shows me that's a cardboard box that's providing that frame there. So even just putting a little bit of filler on it just to give it a flush, flat surface, or making sure that your camera keeps that thing in shadow, in darkness, so that it detracts from it and doesn't become something that you can view. And then the last little critique, and like I say, I'm just being nitpicky because I really enjoy this piece. It just comes across with all the ooze and all the griminess. This moss effect that you've got going, this sort of slimy, bright greenish yellow moss effect that's hitting on the walkway that he's on, but also on the little bit of paving where all the poster work is. Detracts a little bit because it's a little bit too much. And then the question I ask is that meant to be corrosive, poisonous kind of stuff? So is it something that's invading the area? Then it makes a bit more sense. But if it's more of a moss sewage effect, most moss and sewage effect always forms within cracks and along ridges between brickwork and things like that. So I think if you had done that on some of the brickwork on the wall, within some of the little, formations between the grouting of the brickwork and some on the floor, would look a little bit more realistic as what you're trying to portray. But that's just being nitpicky because it's an awesome piece. And yeah, lovely stuff. Cool. Right, so that wraps up big figures, the largest category of the entire competition. And yeah, massive kudos to everyone who entered because big figures are no small task to paint. All right, the diorama. Yeah, absolutely. And it was such a big surprise for us to have that many entries in the diorama category, which is cool. All right, so let's switch over and let's start off with that. This is the last one, so we're going to wrap things up, and then we'll, leave a little outro at the back, at the end of it. Yeah, it's possibly that. Let me see if I can reduce this down. Let's do this. Oh, it's always cool to have a proper professional microphone in front of you. Hey, there we go. All right. Do you want to get going on this one, or shall I? This, for me, when I see something like this, is just always harks back to those modeling expos, especially when you look at the historical figure category. The duel between the mounted warrior and then the foot soldier is always just such a it's almost one of those, you have to try one of these if you're a miniature painter. You have to try a little historical duel kind of thing, which is always nice to put your efforts into. So with this one, I love the movement. I love the fact that there's this dynamic action between the two characters. I love the lining of them so that they make sense. You can actually, in one of the photos, you can actually see the eye line of the one character looking straight down at the other, which is always a very good thing to do. Very much so. What I also love from a color perspective, so if we go through step by step, so story narrative, it's there. I love the dynamic movement. I love the aggressive nature of it, because I also love the introduction of a little bit of blood splatter, which makes you then realize this is in the heat of combat, and these guys are right in the midst of it. Love the introduction of all the little bit of detailing and the groundwork and so on and so forth, and that it's patchy as a real battlefield would be. Yeah. And then we get onto the color scheme. Now, the colors, for me, what works really nicely is a good choice in the color combination of blue and red. What detracts for me a little bit is that the blue and red pulls too much focus from the rest of the piece, too often for me. It's the blue and the red that I keep looking at instead of, the horse and the faces of the figures as the two prominent sort of focal points. So that's the only thing on color. But otherwise, I really like this homogeneous tone that runs through the color palette. Within the browns and the blues and the reds, there's this nice homogeneous unity to them. They don't feel too jarring, but like I said, the blue and the red do stand out a little bit too much. Yeah. And because of that, it ties them in nicely, and it really gives them that unity. But like I say, for me, it's almost that if you look at their location on the piece, it's almost like one frames this piece and the other one frames that one, and it keeps pulling the eye towards it instead of to what you want, which is this tension and this character, and he's about to bear down against this other character opposite him, and then the same reflection in the other character, that you want that attention on that. And then lest we forget that the other third focal point of this piece is the horse's face. And you want that tension to portray in the horse as well. So you'd want to bring in some of that more sort of nuanced color to bring some of that more sort of, interesting focal point for you. Like I said, this one is just excellently executed. Good, excellent technique. Just that issue with the red and the blue, almost creating a two opposing points of interest away from what are the real true focal points for me. But yeah, all in all, a really solid piece. Like I say, just a simple shifting of focus is all that's really needed in this one. It's, and that's me just being nitpicky, like I say, because it's overall a beautifully executed piece. Lovely done. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what blows my mind. I look through all the scores on the Diorama category, and every single piece scored high on story. So that's to be mentioned. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Yeah, the base doesn't keep pulling you away. You look at the base, you notice the details, and then you go back up to what you want to see. Very much so. Yeah. Yeah. You almost see remnants. You almost see remnants of what the field looked like before this battle started, with those nice thick tufts of bright green. And then you see now what's happening in the event of things where the grass is being trampled. There's areas of it that are flattened. There's areas that are now dirtier and darkened. It's a nice attention to detail. Mm, yeah. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I'm with you. Hmm. 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 Yeah. Hmm. Hmm. Not easy to do. Yeah. Yeah. Never easy to do folds that are almost in a corrugated shape. That's sort of very tricky. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's why I say with miniature painters, if you really want to keep pushing your skill set, try a historical piece, because what a historical piece does is it forces you to remember there's nothing fantastical, there's no shiny and glistening and magical effects, there's no OSL. Yeah, there's no OSL unless, of course, you're doing a realistic lit night scene and you're doing characters in that regard. But then it becomes even tougher because now you're not doing the the sort of I'm bringing my artistic twist to it and making this OSL glowing. Now I've got to do a realistic lit glowing effect and how light reflects off different surfaces and different material. So yeah, there's a lot to bear with regards to that. But in this piece, like I say, I love the attention to certain details. I love the unification of the color palette. I do also feel that there's a little touch of flatness, that there's no texture. With the skin and the flesh of a horse, there's a little bit of a satin sheen to it. Especially you pick up, yeah, you usually see that sheen hit on the back rear hind legs of the horse, that big musculature. You usually get a bit of a sheen, so that would have been a nice attention to detail. And then same with bringing that attention to the top of the horse, because then it would have drawn the eye to the horse. But yeah, a fantastic piece and uh, an excellent representation of technique and how to bring that technique in. Mm. Yeah, yeah. That was the one. That's the one. I wanted the one with the top looking down, but unfortunately the camera angle's so tight it didn't reflect the rest of the piece for us to then give the feedback. So that's why I went for this one. But yeah, a really really cool piece. A nice bit of work, man. Yeah, man. And this is number one of the diorama category. All right, so we go on to number two, which is D2. Yeah, do you want to get this one going or shall I? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, 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 yeah. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Pause in a second. We'll pause in a second. All good. Yeah, yeah. I also picked that up. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. You know what? On that point, what you were saying with the reds, I almost want to swap places with the reds. I almost want to put the more brighter reds on the hero character because it would work better with that brighter, light blue, and then the darker reds on the villain character because he is dark and brooding. Now, if you had darkened the robes on the evil character, what becomes then the first thing you notice on the evil character? That non-metallic crown and that head. So it becomes even more focal point. So yeah, that's the only thing that for me jarred me a little bit with the reds is that the one seems brighter on the evil character and the red seems darker on the good character, and it almost throws off the dynamic. But in having said that, I love the composition of this piece. So a lot of trap that people tend to fall into when you're doing a one-on-one duel is they tend to just sort of face each other head on a flat base, and one person stands one side and the other person stands the other side. I love the little attention to actually putting this diagonally across the corners of the base. So that immediately presents a nicer view to the scene. And then, of course, raising the villain so that you get this menacing perspective of, more evil and David and Goliath kind of setup. Yep, yep. Lines of sight with same with the staff. It creates that line of sight. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, yeah. In fact, if you look carefully, what they've done, and I don't know if this is intentional, but it's a clever use of line of sight. If you look at the line of the staff and you look at the line of the sword from the evil character, they both interject at a point, and then the hero character's line of the sword then creates a parallel line running off sight. So it's a natural line of sight for the viewer to just follow the blades and the staff along, which is nice use of composition. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I noticed that. Yeah, it's got more weathering, a little touch of brown into it, and it's also got more of a sketchy blend. Whereas I can see on the Hero's Blade that the artist really attempted to push in a nice, smooth, and more highlighted blend, which is nice attention to detail. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, maybe introducing those purples and blue shades into the armor, so it would have given it more depth and value, but then complemented the light blues that are running right next to the armor. Right now, the light gray of the armor and the light blue tend to then lose each other because they're very similar on the cold palette side. But yeah, a really nice piece. Yeah, 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 nicely done. Very very cool piece. All right, so that's D2. We're going to move on to D3. All right. Love this piece in the sense of the sheer scale and size of the thing. I can only imagine because I know the scale with this particular brand of figures and things like that. So quite a large piece. And I love the use of a lot of dust and dirt and weathering. I love the attention to the rust that's running down in streaks along the wall. I love the little bit of graffiti. The one thing that really stands out for me is the warning signs on the fence line, which is really really cool. And then this very clever trick of it almost seems like there's a trench just past the wall, and there's this gap that forms and then you see the grass line, like you would see in a lot of battlefield embankments. So that's a clever play with the camera angle on the optical illusion. It provides. It almost seems like for me there really is a drop just behind that wall. Now, in having said that, a couple of little things that I'd really like to pay attention to, because this piece for me, I think, would stand with a few little adjustments and would really have popped as a phenomenal piece. And that is that the tank is slightly over weathered and a little bit too dusty. And what it does is it makes the thing become then lost amongst the rest of the groundwork. But then because it's also so dusty, it then becomes the focal point that pulls away from everything else. So it's the only thing that I would say is that always when it comes to weathering, less is more. Like blood effects, less is more. Like OSL, sometimes less is more. So, here definitely I would have put a lot of the weathering on a lot of tanks. The turret tends to get a lot of movement and a lot of range, so it doesn't pick up as much dust as you would on the bottom body of the tank and on the treads. So, a little attention to that. Then the other thing for me that is a little bit jarring, and it's something that is a small little touch, a small little attention to detail, but then really pops the scene, and that is that there's no track work. So the tank almost seems like it's been dropped right there, and there's no track work leading up to it. There's no other tracks that have been around or anything like that. So there's no variation in that regard. And then at the same time, the variation of the weathering. There's a lot of dust, but that's it. There's no variation in color. There's no variation in texture. So a little attention to that. But all in all, massive credit, because I can see this is a big piece sitting on someone's table, and there's a lot of work being brought to bear, and a lot of love for this particular genre and that particular style of model. Hmm. Hmm. Clever. Yeah, yeah. A simple tool. Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I saw that. I saw that. Yeah, very, very cool touch. I love that. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. But do you see how little details like that, little narratives to dioramas, is what gets people excited when they see these little stories and these little elements in the scene? And yeah, I love that. Really love that. Yeah, I just love the idea because it would have that streak. Yeah, very cool. Yeah, I know which one. What's his name? Yeah, I know which one you go. His name escapes me. Yeah, he's got a very unique sense of style and unique sense of humor. He does a lot of black comedy kind of stuff. But yeah. You're giggling at this little stroke of the paintbrush that happens. Yeah, 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 yeah. Very cool. But then, in having said that, remember that, of course, little things like that don't want to be things that become the only thing that you see in the whole piece. And like I say, it's very important to then balance everything out. But when you're dealing with a realistic environment, you want to bring in realistic reference. So, like I say, a little attention to track detailing, subdue the weathering a little bit, and bring a bit of variety in the color of the weathering, and you're off to a totally different place with this piece. But yeah, a very cool entry, man. I really enjoyed this one. And like I say, I agree with you. The paintbrush stroke was a nice little touch. Yeah, yeah. And do you also notice that this is a what if kind of scenario? If a particular faction of World War II had won the war, but those little details, that little bit of the narrative gets lost because of so much weathering that you almost don't see those little symbols to show you. You know, yeah, exactly. So yeah, yeah, yeah. But a very very cool entry. Nice work. Right, we're on to now D4, right? Okay, and this one is just a very, very cool, clever use of scale. Yeah, 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 yeah. I dig it. And I like the fact that everything's nice and tight and compact. Cases like this, when people try to create a bit of an action scene and something's then happening, things tend to get a little bit out of hand and things become a little bit disjointed because the piece just becomes too big. But I love how this is nice and focal onto a nice little round base, and that you've split it nicely with, the foe on the one side and the heroes on the one side behind their little barricade and the whole thing. But yeah, I just love that clever use of scale, because I know the figure, the 3D print of the big giant, figure. I'm not aware of the smaller figures, but I love how those smaller figures obviously come from a different brand or a different board game or a different scale entirely. And immediately you just have this now play on giant versus, humans. Um, the tree in the hand, yeah, I was about to say it for me is, the little touch of that for me is sells the scale, because I see the tree in his hand and there's no questioning the scene. Yeah, yeah. They look really cool. It looks like it's that mossy material that railway modelers use. So it's a nice, clever use of texture. It's a really clever piece of work. Love the root work, and then not making it so that it almost seemed like he gave it a perfect cut. It looks like he's actually ripped it out the ground, and the roots are still sticking there. So yeah, really nice bit of work. From a painting perspective, look, you can't fault it. Everything's nice and neat and balanced, and everything's clearly defined, and you know what is what. I think the only thing I would really lean towards is maybe sort of trying to bring in more darker tones into the earthwork, so that the two figures would stand out a little bit more prominently visually, and that the figure, of course, being so tall and prominent, he's going to get all this light reflection on the top of the body. But yeah, the figures almost get lost a little bit. Uh, mm-hmm. Go for it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm with you. Yeah. You can almost see the lovely brown tones in the tree trunk that he's holding in his hand, and you can see highlights, and you can see how even the roots become darker. And then all of a sudden you look at the barricade, and it's these uniform. There's no highlight, contrast, no shadows. If you had brought in some washes even into that and brought out some of the texture in that barricade, would have really made a difference. I get what you're saying. Mm. But yeah, I really enjoyed this piece because I like the fact that it's nice and tight and compact. And to pull off an action scene in a tight space is always tricky, especially with composition. And then really want to give, special mention with regards to playing with scale. It's a clever, clever use of scale, for sure. I've always wanted to play with scale in a model, with models like this. So to see someone attempt it is always, fun to see. Mm. Yeah, yeah. Mm. Exactly. Yeah. Mhm. It forms, yeah, it draws your eye to the flag and makes you aware that there's this character running across the top of the barricade. Very much so. Yeah, a very, very cool piece, man. Like I said, the dioramas were just, every single one of them was awesome. Now, this one is D5, right? Now, this piece for me, I take my hat off. You know what? I myself have always wanted to do the photo box, piece. It's one of those little things that I've always, hoped I'd find the time and the right models to pull off. So when I see someone do it, and then, not only do it half-hearted, they did it all out. For me, is like, hats off. Um, Love the composition. Love the backdrop. The backdrop is awesome. I love the resin work. I love the little bit of reed flowers sitting right along the waterline, which is a clever placement, a very realistic placement of them. And I love that you do get this immediate sense of depth, especially when you see the other photo, which is slightly at a third degree angle, and then you actually see the depth of the box. That for me is really, really cool to see. Um, I love the introduction of moss work so that the whole rock surface doesn't just become this bland rocky texture. It's actually got some green that's drawing the eye and making you look up the piece and see the rest of the thing. Yeah, exactly. Um, the only critiques, and this is once again trying to be nitpicky, is that the foreground seems a little bit too overvalued and too saturated as opposed to the background, which is very pastel and very cold in nature. So the two scenes almost seem a little disjointed. But that, and then of course the character himself. Love that he's made in these very high value tones, so that draws the viewer and makes you want to look at him, but a little bit too ostensibly so. It's a little too ostentatious. It's a little too in your face to say, "Yeah, look at me." I get you. I see you. you know, but a lovely use of work. And then, of course, when you do then look at the closer photos of the figure, you see how there's nice attention to all the little details. The blood work, like I say, in this case, very, very gory, very, very sort of dynamic. It's, this is brutal and it's been a brutal kill, but the blood work isn't too excessive. It doesn't detract from the piece. So I like how there's a nice little bit of blood splatter on the rocks, on the rock floor, but it doesn't go overboard and detract from everything else. You still are constantly shifting eyes at everything else, which is really cool. This also ranks up there with some of my favorites from the entire competition. A really, really cool piece. Nice stuff. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, yeah. It gives you that sense of depth that it fades off. Mm. Hmm. Yeah, and it's a pity. It's a pity that the picture's being cropped off just at the bottom. But there's this nice little resin pool that we're not coming through on the picture. Unfortunately, I couldn't get him scaled in size. But yeah, man, when you're looking at so many factors, yes, you're now creating this large diorama piece, so it becomes a big project, lots of hours. B, you then confine yourself into a photo box. So now you're trying to play with optical illusion as well. C, you're then manufacturing most of the environment and half that rock work and everything like that. And then to then, throw in all the color objectivity that you've got to play with and make sure that you don't detract from the piece. And then you sort of throw yourself a nice little challenge of a resin pour. What the fuck, man? Pardon my French. It's the first swear word. But for me, this one deserves it because, I love the effort. You can see you can see almost there was almost joy in every little facet of this. That the person had fun right from day one with that black box in front of him. You can just see that person sitting there tinkering and playing around and then trying a hand at sculpting and then resin pour and paint work and blood work, and it's just, yeah, just lovely, lovely, lovely entry. Yeah, you see that. Mm-hmm. 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 That's a well. Look, you can't really argue about the real world reference because we are dealing with a minotaur here. So you could have koi but I get you. I get you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mm. Yeah, yeah. Mhm. Yeah, yeah. That's the thing I was trying to imply to earlier is that there's a lot of oversaturation and values in the front of the piece, but the figure almost gets lost amongst it. If he wasn't so bright and vibrant orange, he wouldn't be the focal point. So to maybe subdue those. Hmm. Hmm. That, yeah, it almost gets lost. That's it. Yeah, almost gets a little bit lost. Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Hmm. Yeah, exactly. And here you've got to remember that in miniature painting, in general, not only in a scenario like this when you're putting it in a photo box, but in general, we try and over exaggerate contrast and shadows because then we imply things like depth and value of field and so on and so forth. So in this scenario, I think that there's not enough addressing of the shadows in all the little recesses. So to highlight that, let me show you what I mean by, do you see that broken sort of arched rockway? You see how there's nice attention to the darkness that goes into there, and it creates that nice illusion of that shadow. And I love how the paintwork of the stonework of that archway is done. But then I don't see more of that emphasis of shadow and depth being brought in other little places. Like the shadows behind him, if you had darkened those even more so, you're implying that those really go into shadow and he would stand out more as a frame, you see. Same thing with the two rock walls that come down the sides and meet at the pool. If you had introduced darker shadows towards the back of them, where they hit the border of the background, you're then implying more depth of field, more shadows leaning backwards. So that's the only thing, but that's just being nitpicky because I love this piece, man. Just lovely, lovely stuff. And like I say, one of my top 5 favorites from the competition, without question. Yeah. Nicely done. Nicely done. All right, and then we're on to the last 2, I think. So this is now B7. Oh, is this D6? Sorry, I lied. The last 3. Okay, so this is D6, Delta 6, D6. All good. All right, cool. Do you want to get this one go? Yeah, he's hard at work, man. Hard at work. Mm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Mm. Yeah. Yeah, and that's one thing, it's one thing to create a diorama. It's easy to find figures that look like they're fighting in the middle of a battle, and you can very easily find models from 2 different brands and 2 different creators that you can match up and pair up in a violent, standoff or in a duel. But it is really hard to find comical figures that you could bring in and present a comical scene that makes people chuckle. And that for me is, 2 ticks if you can achieve that. It's very cool. Yeah, love it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I like the fire effect. Hmm. Mm. Yeah. Mm. Mm. Yeah. And did you notice a little freehand tattoo work across the lady's thigh? Very, very cool. Nice little touch. So that it's little things like that. Then you guys just saw the very definition of why you do little freehands like that. You just saw me going into the screen and going, wait, hold on, I can see that. So that's cool, and that's what you want. That's what you want to achieve as an artist, is actually stand back and see someone actually now lean in and take a look at little details like that you put in all the effort for. So yeah, really nice work. I like the introduction of multimedia, so that you've got this very muddy swamp area, and then you've got this OSL fire effect, and then you've got the comical nature of the 2 characters. So lots to keep you busy on a storytelling, narrative wise. I like the attention to, once again, the OSL rule of glow and effect. Glow, the flames are much more vibrant, saturated values of yellow, whereas I like how they then subdued and used more sort of pastel orientated colors for the OSL. So there's no fighting conflict between the two, which is nice. But yeah, all in all, a really cool, fun piece, and a nice tongue in cheek, and it breaks from all the aggressive nature of everything that we see generally in competition pieces. So yeah, nice one to see. Very cool piece. Very much so. Any critiques? Anything that you would recommend to change or anything like that? Nothing. Nothing really. Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. Yeah. Mm. Mm. Yeah. Hmm. That's it. Yeah, yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Very cool piece. Lots of fun. Really enjoyed this one. Cool. All right. And then we're on to now D7, right? Now, unfortunately, D7 is quite a large piece. And once again, we've got the problem of, in this case, it was properly rotated, but I needed to put it to the side so we could actually fit it in for us to see all the work and all the effort. So yeah, if anyone wants to see some of the other photos and the other pics that were presented, you can find them on the Madness Discord. But yeah, we're gonna deal with this one. I hope you guys don't mind. But yeah, I'll get started with this one. With this one, I am always a big fan of old school hobbying, of scratch building something from parts that you can see are not store bought, prefabricated, pre molded. I love the fact that the entirety of the base has been structured up and built up by hand. I love the fact that the little roof tiles are little pieces of corrugated cardboard, and I love having someone sit there and put in each of the tiles and then paint them all up to give that cool effect coming through. And then I love the concept of the whole storytelling. I like the play on words, a 3D world of madness. A nice way to get the judge's attention and getting your piece to be memorable. So that's a really nice, clever piece. Exactly, absolutely. And there's, look, when you're in a competition, no one ever blames you for taking advantage of certain things like that. So, I say lean in and go for it because that's what makes it memorable. And immediately this piece, stands out to me because of that little plaque. Um, the holistically the piece is a lot of work, and credit to the artist. Love all the effort. So the only things I would then come in and possibly mention as small critiques is that the central figure becomes a little bit lost. That if you look at the piece holistically, you see the house and you notice there's a little bit at the bottom, and you notice there's something happening in the middle, but you've got to really then come in and pay attention to it. So your eye is not naturally drawn to it. You're having to force yourself to come in and see what's happening. And then, unfortunately, what it does do is it tends to break up the viewpoints. So now you've almost got three separate points of interest. You've got the bottom scene with the what seems like the sewers and these little fun comical characters doing their thing on the bottom, and then there's a split, and then you've got the cat standing in front of the house, and that's a split, and then there's the roof with the chimney and the snow effect. So just being mindful of not creating a layered viewpoint, and maybe actually having certain characters cross those boundaries so that there's a natural flow of the eye looking at things. So some of those little green guys, if you had one dangling off one of the edges of the wall, that would have forced the viewer to then look at the bottom and then follow him up. That's it. So yeah, that's the only bit of critique I would give the piece. But I love how there's attention to the multicolored bricks. I love the little attention to the window frames and the buildup of dust in the corners. I love all the cobblestone work, the flower beds. So yeah, really cool piece. And just a few little areas that need to bring sort of more focal point and attention to. But if this is one of their first dioramas, you're off to a really really good start, and I'd like to see more from you. Yeah, yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. The test of time. Yeah, yeah. Mhm. 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 Yep. Mhm. Mm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Mhm. 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 Yeah, yeah. Mhm. Mhm. Yep. Mm. Yeah. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Mhm. 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 Yeah, exactly. That's it. Henry, there we go. I think we were catching up there for a second. It paused a little bit, so I might have lost a little bit of the end of what you were talking about. Are you still there? Oh, there we go. Okay. There we go. We had a little bit of a hiccup, so we lost a little bit of the last bit that you were talking about there. Mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I would say for this particular person, I can see that there's a natural talent at building and construction of things, and maybe that's something that is, and that is maybe something that is your forte, is to create these little worlds and these little buildings, and really go to town with creating all the narrative and all the little details. Because I can see there was a lot of fun had in that, and that it's almost like the figures were accessories to the scene on the building and the construction side, because it looks like that seems to be somewhere that this person really thrives. Testing, testing. You still there? Have we lost you? I've lost you. I've got, yeah. Testing, testing. Give it a second. It'll catch up. It'll catch up. Hello. There we go. Are you there? Yep, I'm here. Yep. I can. Can't you hear me now? Oh, bugger. Oh, bugger. We're still online. We're still going. We're still recording. And we're still connected. That's the last entry, man. It's the last fucking one, man. Nah, not at all. Let me check here quickly. Let me try this. Let me see if I go disconnect here on this side and then join back in. Okay. How's that? There we go. Yeah, that's what it is. All right, cool. And it's, yeah, like you were saying just now, it's the last fucking one. And we get the glitch. Cool, cool. Give it a sec. Give it a sec. Yeah, yeah. I'll get it started while we wait for you to catch up. Yeah, yeah. I can hear you, and as long as you can hear me, we should be good. All right, cool. So yeah, I love this piece. I enjoy, once again, creating a whole scene or narrative, and makes it fun for someone to sit and actually, follow the stories and pick up all the little hidden stories within the bigger context of the story. So yeah, I loved the work with creating lots of varying textures and materials. So I love the tile work on the back of the wall. I love the woodwork of the raised platform, and then of course the woodwork on the floor. Just point with regards to those, be mindful of scale. So if you consider the size of those planks on the floor, they seem very, very large for that small figure that's standing next to one of them. So you can imagine the size of that plank. So yeah, just be very mindful of scale. Scale is a very important thing and a very tricky thing when it comes to dioramas. So you've got to be always mindful of the materials that you're using are to scale with the items or the figures that you bring into the scene. I like the fact that each figure has an attention to color of each one. So each one has its own sort of color theme. So you see how you've got the elemental, which is coming through with the nice glowing flame blue, orange and yellow effects. You've got the blue wizard in the corner. You've got more of a purple green wizard in the upper corner, and then you've got this other one with the green and red playing its role. So I like the differentiation of colors. But in having said that, that also then does separate each figure from the narrative at large. So, in cases like that, this is where I would always suggest to someone to use something like a mother color. What we mean by a mother color is having a color that can be influenced by so many colors that you can introduce it into each figure. So each figure is still its own, but is tied through this one unifying tone. So, for example, in a case like this, purple would be a very good color to, influence all those tones and tie them all together. But you can then still make the one character blue and the other one purple and the other one red. Just that purple would play an influence on all the colors. I love the little cloud effect that raises the book stand. Nice little bit of storytelling there. I love the kind of magical effect that they try to bring into on the floor, and how you've got the one wizard creating the one effect and the other wizard creating the other effect, and then generating this element in the middle. But yeah, it comes across as a nice idea, but it comes across a little bit flat on the floor. So maybe if you'd played with some textured medium or something, and maybe created the effect as if the flames are coming up off the floor, that would be quite cool. Mm. Yeah, yeah. Mm. 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 Mm-hmm. Yeah, almost like he's the teacher. Mm. Mm. Okay. Yeah, yeah. Mm. Yeah, yeah. It adds to the scene, but not to the necessarily to the narrative itself. Yeah, yeah. Mm. Okay. Mm. Okay, so I want to avoid that sort of thing. Yeah, yeah. Mm. Yeah, yeah. It's a very similar effect that we were talking about earlier with that one with that had the cardboard base, and then also my eye couldn't take away from it because I kept seeing that. It's little things like that that can then sort of, like I say, it takes the viewer out of the scene, and all of a sudden they realize it's glue and yeah. Mm. Mm. Yeah, 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 yeah. Mm. Yeah, yeah. Mm. Yeah. The only other small sort of issue that I have that it niggles me a little bit because it tends to put off the visual aesthetic of the whole piece, and that unfortunately is the words "Magic Finals" at the back. Um, you know, look, I don't want to come across as a teacher and that you must write your lettering nice and straight and keep it all nice and aligned. And if you think about it, if you ever see a teacher's handwriting on a chalkboard, because they do it all day, every day, some of them tend to be really quite fanatic about making it nice and neat and aligned because that's how they teach. But here, because it's slightly disjointed and it almost seems like it was a quick rush at the end, it throws off the aesthetic of the figure as I'm looking at the whole piece because everything seems nice and straight geometric lines. You've got horizontal and vertical lines that form the entire lines of sight of everything. But the magic finals, because it's slightly off and slightly disjointed, it throws me slightly off. So a little attention to that piece and making sure that if you're going to put lines and writing and graffiti, make sure that they're properly aligned so that they don't throw off the alignment of things and the perspective of the viewer. So that's the only critique I have about the writing on the back. But I love that idea of bringing in the title so we know what it is we're looking at. It helps further the narrative. So yeah, it was a nice touch. All right, and I think that's about it. Are we still waiting for your screen to catch up? Just won't play nice. Let me see if I see that way. No, still won't unfreeze you. It's all good. At least we've got a nice modest angle of you, bud, and we don't have one of those weird frozen faces kind of thing. So you're in a good place. That's always. But yeah, in wrapping up, guys, I just want to say a special shout out to every single entry. For me, what really made me proud is the fact that there was work involved. It wasn't a lot of scrambled last minute paint jobs that were thrown in for the sheer fact of, let me just take part in and really not, put in any effort. There was some serious effort and serious work put into some of these pieces that some of them left me stumped going, damn, you've been busy for the last couple of weeks. So that was, a massive, massive cool thing to see. The increase in numbers, the community engagement I've been witnessing in the background, how some people have been really excited to share their pieces. So it's been awesome to experience. It's been another awesome painting contest. But I just want to do a couple of shout outs for everyone. First off, to my fellow judge, Henry. It's been a pleasure, bud. We've had a nice little chat over the last going close on 4 hours now for the two videos in total. And it's been a busy weekend. Yeah, us last night doing all our number crunching and doing all our scoring, and then today doing all the feedback. And it's been an absolute blast and a pleasure. So my first thank you goes to you. The second thank you goes, of course, to all the sponsors for the Madness 3D painting contest. All the stores that have contributed prizes and submitted towards the prize pool. A massive thank you to the sponsors. And then lastly, a massive thank you to Madness 3D. Funzel, putting together contests like this is nothing but fantastic for a community. As you can see, it gets beginners involved, it gets the intermediates and the advanced guys, with their creative juices flowing, and gets them motivated and inspired to do things and push their skill level. And in general, just raises the bar for the community. And this competition certainly has done so. So, yeah, massive shout out to Funzel and Madness 3D for, doing these kind of things and at the same time supporting the Wildstorm Discord community, which is, an invaluable thing, and I appreciate it a lot. So massive thanks to Funzel. Henry, is there anything that you want to say before we log off? Thanks, buddy. Mhm. Yep. Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. And in having said that, to tie in with community, community is what helps you grow. So, yeah, don't become strangers. And if anything, if you'd like to continue your painting journey and you want to explore and you want to share it with like minded individuals, please come and find us in the Wildstorm Discord community. You won't find a better bunch of folks on that community anywhere else. So, yeah, hopefully we'll see you on the Discord. And I guess there's nothing else to say but to log off with my usual little catchphrase. Uh, Thanks for all your support and keep painting up a storm. Cheers, Andrew. Thanks, buddy. Hold on.